everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Designated Designer, a podcast about design where curiosity is the compass, creativity lights the way, and transformation is just part of the trip. I'm your host, Jennifer Stank, your brand spirit guide for this wild, wonderful ride where we navigate our creative existence in today's modern and conventional world. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. I am super excited to be presenting you with another guest episode. I've been really pushing hard for the guest episodes lately just because I love doing them. It's great to sit here and be a solo episode and kind of talk to you guys, but it's even more fun when I get to have other people participate. And today we have Mike Braun with us. He is a financial and accounting person, and the reason that I'm bringing him on the show today is, if you guys remember a couple episodes back, I did a financial episode as was recommended or requested to me. I had a question. Somebody DM'd me and I wanted to make an episode kind of answering their question, but I am an art person, I'm a creative person, I am not a financial person, and I kind of felt a little bit bad about the episode. A lot of you guys were super sweet to me and said that it was very helpful, and I really appreciate everybody that reached out to me, but I was still kind of feeling down in the dumps. You know, I'm not a financial person, don't specialize in it, don't ask me to, I don't find it fun. But that's why there's people out here like Mike that do find it fun and made this their professional career. So today, just for you guys, because I love you so much, I brought on a professional. So without further ado, I am super excited to introduce to you Mike.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you again, Jennifer, for having me on. And I did give that episode a listen to, and I just want to say, like, I really did think you covered most of the most important stuff when it comes to like bookkeeping, especially. So, I don't think that it was a bad episode in the slightest. So, but I'll be happy to kind of fill in some of like the tat side of it as well, and just kind of give everyone a good rundown of everything like that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the kind words because I was just beating myself up over that episode. But I'm very excited to have you here with us today. I think it's going to be a great episode. I think it's going to be even more educational and informative for all of the listeners because now we have a professional and I'm so excited that they're here. So I just wanted to pull up the question really quick so we could kind of address that first before
Yep.
we kind of go into whatever it is that we're going to talk about today, because I want to make sure it was answered fully. I feel like I wasn't able to answer it fully in my episode. I did my best, but since we have a professional with us today, I'm going to go ahead and read this back. So some of the burning questions was interested in learning about FreshBooks or QuickBooks. I do not know anything about FreshBooks. I do know about QuickBooks. So if you have information on FreshBooks, that'd be great. So FreshBooks or QuickBooks, ins and outs of connecting bank accounts to QuickBooks, invoicing, how getting paid with net 30 or even net 90 kind of stinks, banks holding checks because they don't know if it's real, those types of things. Local credit unions seem to be better than big chain banks, but they have the same policies. Been thinking about going online banking route was the question.
Okay. That's a lot to digest. Holy crap.
Yeah,
But
I know it
well,
was a lot at once.
I'll go over like the very first part you kind of mentioned, and
Yeah,
that was FreshBooks
let me
and
see if I could
QuickBooks.
actually pull this up in the chat because I might be able to just copy this question and chat it so you can see it on your end in Riverside so you could kind of like dissect it. So
Oh, no problem. No, I was actually taking notes when you were doing it, so either way, whichever you want to
okay, cool. We have technology. Let's give this a try. I've never used the chat feature on Riverside, so I guess we'll see. I saw them use it. I was a part of this one seminar. Oh, there it is.
do.
Oh,
Yep.
that's so fun. We're learning new things.
Yeah, I can see it, no problem. So, all right. Well, I'll start
Cool.
fresh. When it comes to what I do in like just FreshBooks and QuickBooks, I'll be honest, I have actually no experience with FreshBooks. I've kind of heard about it, but I've never actually used it. Most of my clients just use QuickBooks and mainly QuickBooks Online. I know there's QuickBooks Desktop, but everyone's kind of, or QuickBooks or Intuit's just kind of been pushing the online version. So that's obviously what everyone's been using anymore. And I do highly recommend QuickBooks, although I think there's also other alternatives out there that I always give my clients. So I'll be happy to kind of give a quick rundown of what those are, just because QuickBooks is expensive and they're only ever changing that to make it more expensive each year. So I think actually recently they just had a price increase. So that's also something to factor in as well. Um, in terms of like cheaper alternatives though, Obviously, you could always use Google Sheets. That's always one option if you ever wanted to kind of use a little bit more of a manual route. But if you don't have a high transaction volume, meaning that you don't have a lot of transactions going in and out of your accounts each month, that'd be perfect for you. And if you do want to use accounting software, then Wave is another one that's actually a free accounting software that's out there for most people that any business owner can use, and it actually does connect with your bank account. So, um, similar features to QuickBooks, and I do believe there is like a paid version of it, but it's a lot cheaper than QuickBooks. I think it starts at like $15 a month, something like that. So that's another alternative to QuickBooks, just because everyone talks about QuickBooks, but I also know that it's a very expensive software when it comes to accounting. And it's also something that, a lot of business owners kind of jump into, but they don't really know 100% what they're doing. So I just kind of recommend the either Google Sheets or maybe just like a Wave alternative, just because it might be the better just for starting out, especially with accounting software. Um, when it comes to connecting bank accounts to QuickBooks, I think that's a whole nother um, discussion to have. But when it comes to connecting the bank account itself, obviously QuickBooks connects with most banking accounts I think out there, and I think they have like 20,000 accounts that they actually connect with, or banks and credit unions that they connect with. So they do connect with most of the banks and credit unions that are out there. The Obviously the downside is when you have like app transactions like PayPal, Square, Stripe, and things like that. That's a whole nother topic to kind of jump into as well that I can talk about later. But when it comes to like connecting the bank account, I really don't have like any hack or anything like that when it comes to doing it. The only thing that really comes down to is just kind of entering in like I know the process is kind of stupid when I'm talking about it now, but it's like just literally just taking your login info, logging into the bank account, making sure um, when you do go into the next part on the screen, you should see something like how far do you want to go back to pull in the transactions. I always recommend that you go as far back as you can, even if you've already like done your bookkeeping for, let's say, that whole entire period, maybe on Google Sheets or something else. It kind of just makes sure that you have all those transactions entered in, so that you don't have to go back at a later date and end up having to re-enter them into QuickBooks or anything like that. So that's just one way to just kind of make your life easier when it comes to connecting your bank account. And when it comes to the other alternatives, like I know you mentioned before, Jennifer, about PayPal being a big issue, and I completely agree with you because I've had clients now that have
Oh, did I
PayPal.
mention that? Did I mention that in the last episode? Just
I,
probably a little touch.
just a little bit. And
Yo, the PayPal integration in QuickBooks will be my downfall. I swear to God. Like, it is so bad right now. And
yeah,
for me, I think it was so great that you brought up that there are alternatives out there. And I just want our viewers to be very aware of that. Is I think there's this weird perspective shift in the industry where there are these companies that it's kind of like they're the only ones you would go to for a
yeah,
certain service. So when people think like online invoicing and keeping books, QuickBooks is pretty much the dominating name. And I actually had a friend tell me about this because they were looking into getting like an Insta360 like action camera. And
yeah,
they said it was crazy because when they were shopping for action cameras, GoPro has dominated the market to the point where even if it's not a GoPro, if it is an action camera that is off brand, people call it a GoPro. When you have that kind of market domination, you're working with this weird perspective shift. So I feel like QuickBooks has kind of done that, where even if it's like not an invoicing software, like even if it's not QuickBooks, if it's just an invoicing software, I could believe a time where somebody would call that QuickBooks because they've dominated their market in that industry. But it's really important to remember there are alternatives out there for people that are a little bit more budget conscious, or they're just starting out, because I feel like a lot of the issues for me that arise with QuickBooks is it is such a dense software. It is built for these multi-million-dollar companies. It is built for these huge teams. It is built for industry. It's built for corporate. So when you try to put that into a lens where you're working with like a solo entrepreneur or just a freelancer, sometimes it could just be so overwhelming and so dense. So if there are alternatives out there that are a little bit easier to work with, a little bit less overwhelming, because the more features you add, the more issues you run into. The
yep,
more features that are available, the more things there are to break. So if there are less options for your smaller business, and then you grow into these other things as you go. So I think that was just a really great point that you made.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And you mentioned a good point as well. And when it comes to like invoicing softwares too, obviously everyone kind of leans towards QuickBooks just because it's obviously like an all built-in one kind of system. But there's also like Stripe, Square, like you can just use those independently if you need to as well, and just use that for invoicing software. It obviously makes your life just a lot easier because then you have like a whole hub for invoicing, and then you could just use Google Sheets or something like that just for the expense tracking and sort of thing like that. So there's several different things you can kind of do. I do recommend if you're going to build like a accounting system, I guess you could say, you just kind of do a little bit of thinking beforehand. You don't just like wing it, I guess you could say. I mean, you can. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I mean, we're business owners here. We all kind of wing some things here, so I'm not going to say no. But um,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, try to have like a general plan of where everything is kind of going within your accounting for your business, I guess you could say. I know you mentioned too the net 30 and net 90 definitely sucks. I can agree on that. So basically, I'm assuming that that's basically just like invoicing terms. So basically, like net 30 would mean that that client has 30 days to basically pay off that invoice or 90 days to pay off that invoice. I mean, when it comes to the breakdowns and how long you should give a client to kind of pay you, I guess it kind of varies on the industry you're in. I think for the design industry, I would say like net 15 and net 30 would probably be reasonable. Now, I know that's also like very dependent. I guess it kind of say it's depending on what project it is you're doing. Like if you're doing a bigger project, then you could obviously break that down into like smaller invoices or maybe like a half up front, half at the end kind of a thing. At least that's what I would do, especially in that regard, just because then you kind of make sure that you're getting some money before you actually just do a huge job. Because then the net 90 would obviously that would suck in that case if you did all that work just to not get paid at the end. So I would recommend either sticking to like the shorter days, like net 15, net 30, basically just giving your client 15, 30 days to pay. And I recommend if you are using QuickBooks or if you are using any sort of invoicing software out there, just make sure you set up like, I know QuickBooks does it. I'm assuming Stripe does it too, where you can just kind of set up like automatic reminders to remind your clients that basically that they owe you money. So make sure you do that as well, especially if you want to get paid on time, because I know that's a lot of it. That's a big issue with a lot of people anymore. I've got a lot of clients now that I do invoicing for, and they're getting paid beyond the due date that they actually have set for the customer. They don't. So I tried talking and convincing them to kind of add penalties or late fees, but some customers or some clients of mine just don't like the idea of it. But that's also another alternative too. If people are paying you late, you could always add a late fee just to kind of show to that customer that, hey, I don't really want you paying late. I want you to pay like on time and this is kind of like the penalty for that. So that's another option as well when it comes to just the whole invoicing and making sure they're paying you on time. Just moving on. So I know the next one was just banks holding checks because they don't know if it's real. I'll be honest, I haven't had any sort of issue like that before. That's a new one for me. I actually haven't heard of that one before. But I could see when it comes to checking, like I don't know, is in like the design industry, is that like a very common way to be paid is through checks, or is that like a common way to kind of have like deal with expenses? Do you guys normally do checks, or is that
It
kind of it?
depends. So I've actually had it where my first ever job ever, my first ever freelance job, and I framed the check. It was one of those like first dollar moments. My
Okay.
first ever design job, I got paid by check, which I thought was really ironic. It was $100. Like who pays by check $100? I guess whatever. But I got paid by check. I actually framed that check, and it was like their company name was like on the check and everything. I thought it was really cute. But I got paid by check my first freelance job. And then that was the only time I got paid by check until later, years later. There was one company, it was like a bunch of old heads. So it was a agricultural company in PA. So you
Oh,
already know the type of clientele that we're working with here.
yep.
Agricultural company like farmers from PA, they ended up paying by check. But both times I had checks. The first one I deposited in my personal account because I didn't have a business bank account. live yet. But then the second check, I was using my Ally. So like in that episode where I talked about finance, I kind of talked about how I have my account set up right now. And Ally was my business account initially, and now I'm using it as my personal account. I phased Truist out because I was robbed of $8,000 that they ended up giving back to me, but it was just an uneasy situation.
Jeez. Yeah.
So I ended up migrating to Ally for my personal, but at the time I was using that as my quote unquote business account, because at that time the only thing I was using for my business was PayPal, and I couldn't like take a check into PayPal. I don't think at the time, I think they actually do have a feature now where you can put checks into PayPal, but at the time I don't think that they had that. So I ended up depositing that check into Ally. But yeah, that was the only 2 times I was ever paid by check. I would say it depends on your clients. Because if you're working with the agricultural PA type, you're likely going to be paid by check more. If you're working with our generation, the younger, clientele type, where we're all like fresh business owners, it's likely to be digital or like Cash App or whatever. So it really depends on your customer.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Kind of going back to that too, like when it comes, so I guess like when it comes to dealing with any sort of check, at least this is always the motto that I give my clients whenever they're cashing checks. Anymore, you don't have to go to a bank to generally cash a check. Usually on the back side of it, if you have like your banking app, you can take a snapshot of it and upload it, and basically they'll just cash it, mobile deposit. That's generally what I recommend for most clients. Now, obviously, there is that rare scenario where, I mean, it's very rare. I haven't had any issue with it yet. I haven't had a client that it's happened to yet. But I know there are people that are out there where they'll have insufficient funds in their account when they actually issue the check. And when you go to cash it, usually your bank actually will issue you a fee because they think that you're basically trying to cash a fraudulent check. They usually issue like a $30 fee because the bank account that you're trying to deposit this check from didn't have any money in it. And while that's not an issue that I've had, I mean, the best case scenario that I could think of that you could do in that case is just kind of go back to your client. Hopefully they're a good person and they're reasonable and it was just an accident that happened. But unfortunately, I do think that the people that are doing that sort of thing are usually in it for bad business purposes. So unfortunately, that's something you're just gonna have to either bite the bullet on, or hopefully they're a good client and they'll eventually pay you without an issue. But yeah, when it comes to checks and banks holding checks, I haven't really seen any sort of thing where like the bank holds a check for too long. Most of the time, like for depositing a check, it takes like a couple days at most. But I haven't had any issues with banks holding checks, so I'm a little bit unfamiliar on that one. So that might be something you might have to run by the bank that you use or the credit union that you use as well. I'm not sure, whichever one.
Yeah. I wanted to add to the check thing because one way to protect yourself against a fraudulent check
Yeah.
where they don't have enough like money in their account is, if like have the conversation with your client. Ask them, once you're getting close to project completion, ask them, how do you plan on paying? Are we doing ACH? Are we doing check? Are we doing like credit card? Like, how do you want to pay? Figure out how they want to pay. And if they say that they want to pay by check, what you can do in that instance to kind of help protect yourself a little bit is say, okay, if you are choosing this payment method, here's how this is going to work. You're going to send me the check. I'm going to cash the check. Once payment is received, you will receive your final files within 24 hours.
Yeah.
And this way, if there's any issues, if anything goes on, the ball's in your court. You control the situation. You're kind of handling what's going on there, because that gives you just a little bit of protection against if something does happen. Now you can make the decision. It's not in your client's hands. It's not like they could run off with the final files. Whenever you're in a situation where you're a little bit uneasy about, am I going to receive payment? Am I going to get ripped off? Just withhold the files until payment is received. Your client will understand. And as long as they love you will receive your files within 24 hours of payment being received. They love that. That's a binding contract essentially in its own terms, and they could feel really comfortable with that. That's what I've been doing to kind of help protect myself a little bit from that kind of stuff.
No, that's actually like that's actually what like I would recommend as well. I think that's actually like the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And the other thing you kind of mentioned as well is kind of like you mentioned like prefer payment methods. Now I know like I'm assuming at least in your industry like there's higher payment in the sense that you're talking about thousands of dollars instead of just a couple $100 micro transaction. I obviously think that when it comes to that, you generally want to avoid credit card fees because that's obviously going to eat into your profits, actually, really, when we're talking about it here. Because, you know, credit card fees are ranging between like 2.7% to even like 3.5%, plus the 30 cents. But, that's obviously like for $1,000 job, that's you're talking about $39 right there if it's 3.9%. So it's just a huge fee that you can kind of avoid. I know ACH is probably, I would say ACH is probably the best one for your industry just because I think it's only a $5 fee. And there are invoicing platforms that are starting to come out there now. I use Anchor for one of them, and they just charge like a $5 fee, and you can charge the credit card fee onto the client. So that's another alternative too, if you want to avoid credit card fees or anything like that. And you can kind of just, I'd say ACH though is probably like the best form of payment for the industry that you're in, just because then you can avoid these massive fees with credit card companies and things like that. So that's just
Yeah.
another thing I'd recommend.
For sure, that's a really good recommendation because it really does add up. Like, you don't really realize it until you start actually looking at your numbers,
Yeah.
and then it like hurts in a whole different way. But I think it's really important to just kind of be aware of your numbers. I think as creatives, that's something that we can kind of lose sight of easily. But it is super important to be aware of your numbers and have that awareness, because if you don't know what's in the bank and you're spending recklessly, you're not kind of proactively planning for your future. I feel like for me, for a lot of the stuff I do financially, I'm always working a month or two ahead. I'm not currently operating in the month that I'm working. And I know at first when you start your business, it's going to be tough. You're not really going to be able to plan that far ahead. I was there last year. Trust me, I know. I was not planning 1 to 2 months ahead. The first year in business, you are just focused on surviving, and that's okay. That's normal. That's part of the process. But once you start to establish your roots in your business and really grow into everything, you really have to start shifting your mindset towards planning out your finances a month or 2 months or even 3 months if you can. Just because that way you're proactively working towards your future. You're starting to work towards your goals better. You're starting to work towards, what you want to make each month. You can start to plan that stuff better instead of being in this like reactive state of survival. Now you can kind of take that control seat and start to map out specifically where it is you want to go financially. I think that that's super important. And just be aware of your numbers. Start an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc or something easy, something low stress. For me, I know all the creatives out there love Notion, and that's actually where I do my number keeping. Is I have a Notion spreadsheet and I track every time a payment comes in. I automated it with Zapier, so there's literally no excuse. Don't be lazy. So whenever I get a payment into QuickBooks, Zapier picks up on it and drops a new line item in my spreadsheet. It all happens automatically. Don't even have to put effort in. And when I have to check my books, when I have to be aware of my numbers, I go to my page in Notion and I take a look and I say, okay, we're good. Or, okay, I have to work harder. Okay, I need to work on client acquisition. Okay, I need to work on visibility. And this is where you can really start to stoke the flames of your business. So I just wanted to add that that's pretty important too.
No, no, that's a huge, that's very important as well. And I actually use Notion as well, so I'm not the most creative person, but I do
Hey,
use it.
no way! A Notion person. I am so obsessed. Everybody, I'm a part of this one co-working call with some other creatives we usually do on Thursdays. I had to miss this Thursday because we're filming this podcast,
Oh,
but
that's
that's
awesome.
okay. Yeah, I'm usually a part of this co-working call with these other creatives, and they all are like, Jen's the Notion queen. Like, they're always like, if there's ever a question about Notion, all of them are like, ask Jen. Jen knows Notion. And I helped the one girl, I coached her through some Notion stuff, Eileen. Hey Eileen, I know you're probably out there listening. But I helped her with some Notion stuff, and it's just so fun. I love how you could just drag and drop stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, for a typical creative ADHD brain, it is like the optimal software to just organize all of my chaotic thoughts. So I love it so much.
No, I use it for all the back end stuff, so I enjoy it as well. And
Yeah.
yeah, but I want to jump into one thing, just the last, I guess this was actually the last thing that that person commented or mentioned to you as well. And that was local credit unions seem to be better than big chain banks, but they have the same policies. Thinking about going the online banking route. I mean, there is so many things you can do with this. I don't have like a specific bank that I recommend. I will say the only thing that I usually tell clients is to avoid any bank that has fees. That's obviously banking 101, I guess you could say. But there's a lot of these like minimum account balance fees that I know a lot of business bank accounts have, and that's something that you're really going to want to avoid, having a minimum balance fee, just because not that it should ever get to the point where it's extremely low, but there are cases where, you might have a balance issue maybe once in every year or something like that. And you don't want to have to pay a fee just for not having enough money in your bank account. That's like the stupidest thing that banks could ever do. Another fee that I've seen a lot of is like paper statement fees, where basically like the bank will issue like a bank statement each month, but they'll mail it to you and they'll actually add a fee to that. So just another way for them to make a little bit of money off you on top. Just another thing that you can easily avoid. If I was to recommend like a specific bank or anything like that, I just think credit unions, if you're trying to stay like local to where you are, if you're like more of a local presence kind of a business where you're just trying to stay in like the local area, I recommend probably a credit union, just because generally credit unions are, I think, at least I've had the best experience with credit unions compared to bigger banks. I just think that they're the easiest to work with, though my own credit union has been a little bit bad lately, so I'm thinking about switching. Um, but if I was for like the online people, I would highly recommend the online banking route, just because I know clients that have so many, they've opened like 5 banking accounts, and they have all of them are for free, and they're all through like the same company, and or same banking, I mean. The only thing I recommend if you're going to do the online banking, just make sure they're FDIC insured. Obviously, you don't want to, if there is any rare case where someone gets into your bank account, you don't want to lose that money, find out that it's not FDIC insured. There's a lot of issues with that recently. I'm trying to remember there's a specific name. I believe it's like um, fin fin banking or something like that. There's like it's like this new sort of finance thing, and a lot of what it is they're basically just third party banks, but they're not actually a bank, but they'll call themselves a bank, and they're not FDIC insured. And if you do put your money in them, then there is a chance that you might lose it. I know there was one issue last year where uh, someone had basically used this third party banking, and the third party banking, what they do is they're basically like a subsidiary of a bigger bank, if that makes any sense. I know I'm talking kind of finance language right now. But what ends up happening is that money that's in your third party bank, the bank that you're actually dealing with, isn't really a bank, and they're basically putting your money in an actual bank. But the bank that you're actually putting money in isn't FDIC insured. And what happened was basically the middleman, in this case, the one who was actually like they were sending the money to here, and then the middleman sent it to the bank. The middleman had an issue, and everyone's accounts got frozen, so no one was able to touch any of their money, and that's just a big issue that hopefully it's you see a lot less of it as time goes on, but that is something that's kind of happening. So just be careful with online banks. Just make sure they're FDIC insured. That's really all you need to know.
Very cool.
And no, I know I made that a little bit more overcomplicated than I needed to.
No,
But
I love it though. That's why I was so excited to bring you on. I'm like, yes, talk the professional financial jargon that none of us know. I love it though.
and the other thing I was gonna say, like the benefit of having an online bank account too, compared to like like the local credit unions and things like that, is I mentioned you can obviously open multiple different accounts. I have clients now where, I didn't originally think it was a good idea, but now looking back at it, I do think it's a good idea. They'll open multiple accounts, and they'll basically set up transfers to go to like a TATS account. So they'll have like a whole bank account dedicated to TATS. I think that's a good way, especially if you're not sure how much you should be saving, or if you're not sure like how much you want to be putting away, or if you even have any money saved away for taxes. That's like just a great way to do it, because you can have a transfer go every month. You could say $500 or however much money you want to put into this tax account, just to save for when you do have that tax bill. If you're paying quarterlies, you could pay it every quarter. If you're paying at the end of the year, whichever you really prefer, I guess. Having that money just saved away and put for that alone, and just saying, hey, I can't touch that money. That's for taxes. I can't touch it. I think that is a good alternative, especially if if you're just like that, where you don't know if let's say you don't have a budget, you just kind of wing things, especially because that's what most business owners do, especially myself. I think that's just a great way to just kind of stay on top of it a little bit, just to have a general idea of where your money's actually going.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such great advice because I actually do that where I have a checking account and then I have a savings account and everything
Yep.
in the savings account is for taxes. I'm saving that as the year goes on so that way at the end of the year I'm not in a situation where I have to come up with thousands of dollars. I don't have it. So yeah, that's super great advice.
Yeah, no, I think that's, and funny enough, I actually got that from a client. So don't think like I'm the know all be all person. I mean, I learned that from one of my own clients. So it's not like I know everything situation. But it was definitely, I kind of picked, once I kind of realized what he was doing, I was like, this actually is a good idea. He did automate it somehow. I forget what he used. He might have used Zapier now that I think about it. I don't 100% remember. But he basically created like automated, um, bank transfers. So once the money came in from the service he provided from the invoice, it basically just transferred out like 30% to taxes, to the tax savings account. And then it would do like 20% to another account. He did something like that. I don't remember what he used. I might have
Wow.
to look into
That's
it just to say,
smart.
but
I was gonna say, because in Ally, they actually have it set up. I was digging around, and anytime that I can, I like to educate myself on software. When I'm in a banking app, when I'm in Ally, or when I'm in QuickBooks, I'm always digging around for the new features and stuff. And in Ally, in the savings account specifically, they'll give you these projections where it says, like, here's what's in your savings account, here's what it can look like in so many years if you do these things. And in those things that they give you as options, one of them is essentially setting up those automated deposits where
okay, yeah,
whenever you receive money into the checking account that's set up, it'll draw however much percentage and automatically put it into the savings account for you. So
yeah.
I think that that's just really cool because the less that you have to worry about, the less things that you have to do, if it can happen with you just not even having to worry about it, the better. When it comes to savings specifically, I feel like if you can have that kind of stuff just happening in the background, before you know it, you turn around and your savings account is like $10,000 and you're like, wow, how'd that get there?
Yeah, no, I do agree. And honestly, maybe it is Ally that he's using because I remember it was just something where he was able to automate it, but it actually might have been Ally now that you're talking about it because I
Oh
remember
my
there was
gosh,
like
I
an
love
Ally
Ally.
savings account or something like that in his account.
Yeah.
Um,
They have the highest savings rate, I think. Because at the
yeah,
time when I opened my Ally back in 2020, they were like the highest savings account rate bank at the time. I don't
yep,
know if that's changed since, but they always had a really high percentage savings account and that made it desirable. It was,
yep,
I feel like Ally was one of the first online banks of its time. It was, I think that they're like Philly based or something like that.
yep.
But they were like one of the first online banks to kind of take the stage. And I love Ally so much. I've had such a good experience. Never had money go missing mysteriously. They're so receptive. Like you would think it was a big scary thing to kind of transform into this online banking world because everybody was so scared. It's like, I can't go to a brick and mortar store. How am I going to deposit my checks? There were so many unanswered questions. We
Yeah.
didn't know what that future looked like until mobile deposits came out and all that kind of stuff that ended up advancing the industry. But at the time, it was very new and strange. So it's like, who do I talk to? Like, if there's a problem with my account, I can't go to a bank teller. It's like, but they have so many resources. Honestly, I've never had a problem. I love Ally so much.
Ally needs to sponsor you at this point, I think. You talk so much about
Yeah, I know, right? Ally, are you listening?
it.
So tell
Um,
us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you help your clients and, a little bit about your business. Give us some backstory. How long have you been doing it? That kind of fun stuff.
yeah, no, I can definitely give that. So funny enough, I guess I could go all the way back to college when this actually started, I guess you could say. When I actually started out in college, I wasn't actually a business major, accounting major, any sort of thing like that. I was actually engineering, and somehow, some way, I ended up getting on the business path. Don't really remember how. Just kind of, I think I had a business minor at the time. Wasn't really sure what I was doing in engineering. Eventually led me to business and just kind of this profound love for business. And that's kind of what started me, at least in accounting, was just because accounting was my favorite class actually in when I was taking my business major. Accounting was my favorite class. So ended up taking more accounting classes and then realizing that, like tats and audit and all this stuff, and realized audit is my least favorite. I'll tell you that right now. I hate auditing and I'm not ever going to get into it. Thank God. But tats and bookkeeping ended up just kind of becoming something that I was actually slowly kind of gaining interest in, especially tats. Bookkeeping and accounting, in college at least, I don't really talk too much about it. It's kind of like one of those things, I guess you could say it's kind of overlooked, I think is the best really way to describe it. Um, and I graduated, ended up working I got a job as an accountant for a government, a local, well, I guess you could say a school district, I guess you could say, but basically like local government, because that's really what they're considered. And realized, first off, if in case you did not know, the government is 20 years behind, so the software we're using is outdated galore, and just it's all manual. There's no automation at all. So it was just kind of outdated for what I was looking for. And didn't really ever fall in love with the jobs. And when I was kind of going through that time period, I always thought about being an entrepreneur. I had learned about bookkeeping through some YouTube videos, at least at that time, and kind of started taking more, just trying to learn more about it. Because at that point, within accounting, I guess you could say bookkeeping, as I mentioned before, is kind of underlooked. It's not really something we focus on. So, but as a small business owner, and if you're trying to prepare your taxes, it's obviously something you have to do. You can't not do it. So, just kind of learning that again was very important for me. And I really did fall in love with bookkeeping then more than tats, which was fun. It just made my life a lot more better and a lot more fun, I guess you could say, because tats is a whole nother, you're in a whole nother world if you're in the tats world. Let's just say that. And so I started my bookkeeping business back in September of 2023. Got my first client in November of 2023, and ended up leaving that job in May of 2024 to kind of do the full-time bookkeeping. And then I actually brought in tats last year, so I did start offering like tats preparation services and things like that, as well as payroll services. So that is something that I do. Kind of a full service accounting firm now at this point, where I do bookkeeping, tats, and payroll. It's just kind of the full display, I guess you can really say. So, when in the terms of like the specific businesses that I work with, I kind of work with a wide range. But in terms of the ones that I prioritize, um, the most fun that I have, at least when it comes to bookkeeping, is mainly in junk removal industry. I don't know why, but that's just the industry that I've somehow managed.
No way.
It
I
is.
just did a trailer wrap for the junk removal. That's
All
so
right.
cool. I'll have to recommend him to you.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about junk removal, but it's just junk removal and the weekly trash pickups, just like the general trash business in a way, I guess you could say, is just kind of the most fun to work with for me. I feel like it also has like the most fun and outgoing entrepreneurs. I don't know why, it just is. And landscaping is another one as well. But that's a whole nother topic for another day with when it comes to landscaping businesses. But those are the two that I mainly work with. In terms of who I prepare taxes for individuals, businesses, all types of businesses, because you got the different entities that are out there. You got like the sole proprietors, single member LLCs, partnerships, S corporations, and just corporations in general. So you kind of have a full spectrum, full range, I guess you could say. But the only things I don't do, at least as of right now, is I don't file estate returns or trust returns. Those are the only two that I'm staying away from, and they're just too complicated for me to understand. So that's generally why I avoid that stuff. But mostly that's for wealthier people, so I'm okay with avoiding that sort of thing. So
Awesome. Well, if there's any listeners out there that are interested in contacting you for questions about bookkeeping or taxes, or maybe somebody's out there that's interested in working with you, how would you recommend them go about reaching out to you?
yeah. So there's multiple ways to contact me. You can do it through Facebook. Facebook is probably the most active social media platform I'm on. I'm also on LinkedIn, but just not as active as Facebook. So you can look me up, Michael Braun, or Braun Financial and Accounting Services is the business name if you want to do it through there. In terms of email, you can reach me at mike@braunfis.com. I had to abbreviate the name just because it was way too long. And for if you ever need a text or phone call, you can call me at 607-765-1466. I don't mind receiving phone calls or texts or anything like that. I actually appreciate it. So
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I wanted to touch a little bit on savings and the importance of that if you wanted to talk a little bit about that. Just
Yeah.
because for me, I think savings is one of my burning questions. So we got to answer more in depth the question from one of my listeners. But for me, I have been struggling a lot lately because now my business is growing. I'm at the point where I made so much in revenue last year. I'm tracking to make about the same, but maybe just a little bit more this year. And I'm looking to dump gas on the fire for the coming year because the way that this year shaped up for me specifically, I made a certain amount last year. I'm tracking to make almost exactly the same thing this year, and it is not a lot. It's like $23,000 I came in last year. Right now, I'm only at like $14,000, and we're about a little over halfway through the year. So
Okay.
based on my projections, it looks like I'm going to track to make about the same as last year. I worked less hours, so that's good.
Yep.
Being aware of your numbers, everybody, here it is in action. I worked less hours, but I'm going to make about the same amount. So that is a good sign. But I do need to make much more than that if I want a sustainable living, because $20,000 a year is a little bit ridiculous. If I could try to get up closer to like 30 and 40, I feel like that would be a little bit more comfortable. So I'm really trying to focus on things like how can I get into affiliate link programs and start generating passive income streams? That's a big one, passive income streams and merch store and online templates and courses. Like I'm really looking into a lot of that stuff. But as I was looking into that stuff, I realized savings accounts do generate interest. So
Yep.
that's another passive income stream that I can tap into as long as the savings are large enough. That could become profitable because right now, like the client work is great and it's keeping bread on the table. It is, but I need to figure out a way to make it more profitable. And right now, I feel even though I worked less hours than last year I worked a lot. And this year, I'm still working more than like a typical 40-hour a week job. So it's like I don't want to be working that much. And I'm just trying to figure out ways that I can figure this out where I could kind of get these passive income streams up and running, savings accounts, affiliate links, stuff like that. So if you have any information on what could kind of help me in that regard, that'd be super awesome.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I mean, when it comes to savings accounts, obviously a lot of savings accounts anymore have really low interest rates. That's pretty obvious, especially like
Mm-hmm.
at least my credit union, I think it's like 0.007%. It's like tiny. So it's obviously
Yeah.
not worth putting any sort of money like that into the savings account through your credit union. I highly recommend looking for what we called high yield savings accounts. That's probably the best interest rate that you'll probably find is through a high yield savings account. My personally, at least for my personal self, I don't have any for the business, just on my personal side. I do use Discover as my high yield savings accounts, and I believe that's yielding around 3.5% right now is what the high yield savings account interest rate is, which is actually
Yep.
kind of small for a HYSA. And hopefully I would recommend finding one relatively between 4 to 5%. If you can get a 4 to 5% interest rate, you're doing really well for a savings account, in my opinion, because that's a huge return for the money that you're putting in. I do recommend avoiding any sort of like bank or credit union savings accounts just because usually they're the smallest when it comes to like interest rates. There, you could go down the CD route, which is basically getting a certificate of deposit, where basically you put your money away for a certain amount of time and you're not supposed to touch it. You could touch it, but there's penalties, but I don't think the penalties are anything so like crazy. I think it's just like 3 months of interest or something like that. But if you're okay with putting some lump sum of money away, like a couple thousand or a couple $100, you could do that as well. Just again, the only downside is you wouldn't be able to touch it is the only thing I guess you could say. There obviously is like the stock market route as well. Obviously there's a lot of things going on in the stock market. I think this year it's been pretty good. I haven't really kept too much tabs on it lately, but um obviously like the S&P generally returns like an 8%, so that's always another option as well. And you didn't mention it yet, but I figured this was another topic we'd later go on was retirement. I know retirement's kind of a big
Yes.
one, especially for
Yes.
um, especially for solo business owners, just because it's kind of just a touchy subject, especially for many people I've talked with. There's obviously different things you can do. There's traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs. That's the general consensus, I guess you could say. And generally what I recommend is if you're a low income earner, then generally you're going to want to be contributing to a Roth IRA, because what happens is within a Roth IRA, you're not able to deduct the money that you put into it. So let's say you put in $5,000 to your Roth IRA. If it was a traditional IRA and you put $5,000 in, on your tax return, you'd actually be able to deduct that $5,000. But as a Roth, you can't, because the way it works, a Roth is pre-tax. So basically, when you're putting that money in, I said pre-tax, sorry. It's actually getting taxed upfront. That's how I meant to say it. So you're actually paying taxes on that money upfront. And then as it's in the IRA account, it's basically earning money as it goes on, as long as you don't touch it. Then that's all tax-free whenever you pull it out when you're 67, 69 years old. But if you're a traditional IRA, the reason why you're able to deduct it is because you're actually getting taxed on it later on. So you're actually able to deduct it up front instead. So that's why they kind of have it that way. That's how they kind of have it set up. But in terms of what I recommend doing, again, if you're a low income earner, then Roth IRA is perfect, because what's going to happen is you're going to get taxed at a lot lower rate than you would if you were to put it as a high income earner. So generally that's like the best thing I usually tell people for retirement. Now, there are other options for, I'll say, like high income self-employed individuals. So we have something called a solo 401k, where you're actually able to contribute. So the normal amount that you're able to contribute into your retirement as an individual is, I believe it's 7,000. I think it got raised a couple of years ago from 6,500. So now I think it's 7,000. If you're married, filing joint, it'd be twice that, so 14,000. But if you're single, 7,000. But if you're a self-employed individual and you open up a solo 401k, then you actually can contribute, I believe it's around like $70,000 or $80,000 into your solo 401k for retirement. The only downside with this is, again, I do only recommend this for higher income self-employed individuals, just because it's a whole nother, it's kind of a whole nother ballgame that you're getting into when you jump into a solo 401k. There's a lot more tax considerations, I guess you could say. So you generally want to consult with an accountant or a financial planner as well. So that's just a whole nother topic for another day. But generally what I recommend for most people, traditional IRA, Roth IRA, that's really where you're going to be saving the most for retirement. And like I said, if you're a low income earner, Roth IRA. If you're a higher income earner, go for the traditional. So
Yeah, I think that's so important because it's a burning question for a lot of us, and a lot of us are kind of scared of it because nobody really knows. Like when you step into your own business, it's a whole different ball game. You lose all of your health benefits, health insurance, things like that, retirement that all of these companies like provide you when you work a normal 9 to 5. And now we have to figure all this stuff out on our own. So retirement was always a really big one for me. And I had a professor in college that used to constantly be up our ass about Roth IRA. She would come around and did you enroll in a Roth IRA yet? Did you enroll in your Roth IRA yet? She's like, if you guys start your Roth IRA now, you'll have $1 million by blah, 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 So
Yep.
She was really hard on us about Roth IRA, and that's really kind of the only reason why I remember it. I never really got a full explanation of to what it was and
Yep.
how they work, so that was really great to hear. And I definitely do want to be starting that eventually. I think another burning question that I would love to ask you while you're on the show is, one of the biggest questions I have, and one of the biggest things that I'm trying to figure out in my business, is I'm at the point now where I've grown enough. I want to put myself on payroll, and I do not know how that works. I have no idea about anything because I'm not a finance person. So if there are any listeners out there that are kind of growing in their business and they're establishing themselves and they're curious about how they can go about setting themselves up on a payroll, what kind of advice would you have for us?
Yeah, so I guess the very first thing, so the payroll is kind of a touchy subject in the sole proprietor world or in the business world. So the way it works, I guess you could say, it all comes down to the entity status of your business, which is kind of a whole foreign term for most people, I think. But entity status, I'll break it down, is basically like how you're being taxed. So if you're a sole proprietor, you're being taxed on your Schedule C. So even if you're a single member LLC, you're being taxed on your Schedule C. And for those who don't know what a Schedule C is, it basically just goes on your personal income tax return instead of having like a whole separate business return. It just goes on your actual personal tax return. But for those sort of taxpayers, those that have a Schedule C, there really is no payroll actually for at least the owner themselves. They basically do what's called an owner's draw, because what ends up happening is the profit that they have is just being taxed on at their personal income level. And as a person, or as a Schedule C business owner, you get the luxury of having to pay self-employment tax twice, because you get the luxury of paying the employer side of it and the employee part. Now, you are able to deduct the employer part on your tax return, but the thing is it still doesn't equate to what it still doesn't work out as good as I say deduct, but it really doesn't have a huge impact. I mean, we're talking about a deduction is not as much as a credit, let's just say that. That's how the tax world kind of goes. So when it comes to deducting that half of self-employment tax, it really doesn't matter too much. And just to kind of break that down even further, self-employment tax, so you have Social Security and Medicare. That's basically all it is. And the employee part is 7.65%, and the employer part is just the same amount, just double. So in total, it comes to 15.3%. So on top of that, though, you got income taxes, which is why self-employed individuals, we usually recommend, withholding between 25 to 35%, which seems crazy. Trust me, I I got to do it now too, so I completely understand it. It's definitely crazy to me too. But that's why they have other different entities as well, where you can actually potentially save more in taxes. I will just say one thing as I'm kind of talking about this as well. I will say I'm not for Uncle Sam in the slightest, but I will say that paying Social Security tax at least is beneficial, at least somewhat, just because when you do retire, at least you're going to have some sort of Social Security income in, because that's really what this is going towards when you pay self-employment tax. But obviously, I completely agree in the sense that you don't want to pay as much as taxes as like a huge. I wouldn't want to pay high taxes either. So completely understand it when everyone talks about not wanting to pay taxes. But in terms of putting yourself on payroll, as you kind of mentioned, and kind of avoiding this huge amount in taxes that you're paying, which is self-employment taxes generally, you can actually enroll, or I guess it's not really enroll, but you basically have to be taxed as what they call an 1120S, which is an S corporation. And you have to elect it, so you actually have to become an LLC and then elect to be taxed as an S corporation. And once you do that, then you're actually considered an employee of your company. So you're not the owner of your company anymore, you're actually an employee of it. And you actually have to pay yourself a living reasonable wage. And at that point, you're actually able to determine your own wage, because that's really what the IRS, that's really all the IRS has on it, is a reasonable living wage for the type of role that you're working in. So whatever that may be to you. But for most people, I generally recommend you be taxed as an S Corp as time goes on. So usually like around the $60,000 to $100,000 profit range is generally when I recommend putting yourself on payroll. That's when you'll really kind of see the biggest benefit to it, just because when you're being taxed, like let's say you have like $40,000 in profit, $30,000 in profit, that's just not enough to kind of put yourself on payroll still. It's just kind of because payroll, you have payroll taxes, you have the actual payroll software that you're going to generally be doing, or if you hire an accountant, you'll have that fee as well. And then you obviously have to be able to pay yourself that wage throughout the year, each month, or however you want to do it, each month, bi-weekly, weekly, however you end up doing that. But in terms of, so that's kind of just how you put yourself on payroll. I know that kind of sounds very complicated. I'm trying to do my best to try to simplify it as best I can. But I do think the S Corp route is definitely still a good route for most business owners, especially those that are in that kind of range where they're ready to start saving big on taxes, especially mainly the self-employment tax, because that's really the benefit of becoming an S corporation, is you save on really the self-employment tax, the Social Security and Medicare tax that you end up paying in. So
Yeah,
hopefully
very
that
cool.
makes sense. I'm sorry.
No, that was really good. And I had a follow-up question. So when you say owner draws,
Yeah.
Because I really like that you gave a threshold. Like you would be looking at making yourself the S corp elected, around the $60,000 to $100,000, because that's where it makes most sense. But for the lower half, like the little baby designers like myself, still, how would you recommend handling like owner draws? Like, what does that look like? Is that just simply moving funds from your business account to your personal account and then recording it as an owner draw in QuickBooks? Like, is
Yep.
it just that simple?
It's literally that simple. Yeah. So you don't actually
Okay.
have to. It's literally just really just recording it as. Like literally as you said, I actually couldn't describe it any better. um,
Yes. I'm not totally hopeless, guys.
so what's gonna happen is if you do, like, obviously you have QuickBooks, so you might be familiar with this, but you have like the profit and loss report. So that's generally like what goes on your tax return each year. You run like the full year's worth of profit and loss report, and that's what goes on your return. And then you have the balance sheet. And the balance sheet is just kind of, I guess you could say it's an overview of kind of like how many assets and liabilities you have. So assets, for those who don't know what that is basically just like the cash you have on hand for your company or any sort of like equipment that you might have put into your business. So if you bought like a computer, you generally put that as an asset and then you later on depreciate it, basically the same way as it's basically like expensing it just throughout a period of time. And then liability is just money outstanding. So if you have a credit card, for example, and you basically have a balance on that credit card, that'd be a liability because that's something you have to pay off. That's just like the same thing as a loan. A loan would go on your balance sheet. So what owner's draw is considered as owner's equity, which is basically going to go at the bottom of your balance sheet. And you're just going to see a total amount for each year. Basically, as soon as you pull money out of your business, which you mentioned as well, and you just kind of put it into your personal checking account, that's an owner's draw. And the same thing, if you would actually put money into your business, it'd be considered an owner's investment. So just money that you're putting in. If you're a partnership or an S corporation, it's completely treated differently. So that's why it's just kind of, it's a lot more simpler for sole proprietors and single member LLCs.
Oh, very cool.
Yep.
Yeah, and I feel like that's most of the audience, because I feel like any graphic designer really is going to fall under that category where we're kind of working more at the LLC and single sole proprietor level. We're not really like huge corporations. Otherwise, they're listening to like way more sophisticated podcasts. So I feel like you covered that really well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I know it's kind of a
Yeah.
it's kind of a complicated subject to explain, but it is something that could be very, very beneficial as time kind of goes on. I know, I mean, I did give a range, but I mean, there is that alternative there is that option kind of at any time to become an S corp, and that's really the best tax kind of perspective, I guess I can say. So an S corp, C corp, you don't really want to go down that route because that's like double tax. So you get taxed at the corporation level and then you get taxed at the personal income level. And the way these S corps and partnerships work, I'll just give a quick breakdown on that. I'm not going to go too into it just because I know, like you said, most people here are probably sole proprietors, single member LLCs. But for those that do have like a partner in their business, maybe they're a partnership, the way it goes on your return, so you actually get taxed on the personal level still. You don't actually get taxed on any of the business earnings or any, well, not the business earnings, but you don't get taxed at the business level, I should say. You don't get taxed at the partnership. You don't get taxed at the S corp. You get basically what they call it a pass-through entity. So it actually passes on to your personal income tax return. And usually what the business actually gives you is either a K1, or if you're in the case of an S corp, you might get a W2 from the S corp as well if you're earning wages from it. But the K1 is basically what just goes on your personal tax return, and that's just basically the money that you earned from the business. So
Very cool. These are all big financial words that I don't understand, but I really appreciate the
I know
expertise.
I'm speaking, I know
Okay.
I can understand that. I'm probably speaking a foreign language to some people, but at the same time, I think you're speaking a foreign language to me sometimes too with like Notion. I understand the basics to it, but I do not understand, like, you're probably way more sophisticated when it comes to Notion than I am. So
Oh my gosh, I love Notion. I feel like at this point I could say that I made Notion my bitch. I love it so much. I have it automate everything. So like I got to the point where I don't even have to touch anything to get a client meeting booked. So
That's
I'll
nice.
have a series of like when somebody wants to work with me, they go to a form. fill out the form. And then the form sends a project card to Notion, which generates a task for me to have the meeting with the client. And then it appears on my calendar and like all of it happens automatically. I love it so much. I honestly, someday I feel like I want to get into like Notion tutorials and kind of show people how I use it, because I feel like I'm so passionate about it. I need to do something with it. So, oh, before I forget, last burning question for you for our younger solopreneur audience is going to be, we are all young solopreneurs. Hopefully all of us have big dreams and big futures, and we are looking to buy a house. So I don't know if this is like beyond your realm of expertise, but from a financial perspective, we're solo entrepreneurs, no longer have the typical 9 to 5 like income and tax sheets and all that stuff that has to go into pre-approvals. So when we're looking at buying a house, I know a long time ago I had asked my landlord, who's into real estate, like, what do I do about buying a house now that I own a business? I don't work a real job. I don't have a real paper trail, even though I have my business paper trail. Don't know how they look at that when you go from a job making almost $60,000 a year to making $18,000 a year. And he said that as long as you have 2 years on paper, you can still go through like the pre-approval process and everything like that and start working with real estate agents. So I wanted to just kind of pick your brain on what like buying a house and that type of financial situation would be for like a solopreneur, and what kind of stuff we can do to proactively like plan for a good, smooth process with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't had too many. I only ever had one situation where I've been involved in like the actual real estate process, where actually I just had a client who they're actually both business owners. So they actually both have a solo business that they do. And I will admit that whole process was very complicated. I wasn't actually a part of the whole entire thing. And I don't remember the actual loan that they got for their house that they ended up getting. But I will say it is a very hard process generally for business owners. Unfortunately, they don't make it easy. Let's just put it like that. But I think the best thing that I can really give, at least for advice, and this kind of goes back to like what I've talked about before, like bookkeeping and everything, but just kind of keeping good record keeping for your business. That's really, I think, what's going to separate you from like getting like this loan that they got. I believe is actually going to, I don't think it was the best loan for what they ended up for what they needed, but they were able to secure a mortgage for it based on this loan. But I think if you want like a good home equity or a home mortgage loan, I guess you could say, for when you're looking for a house, I think the best thing that you can really do is just make sure your record keeping is done really well, and that you're basically covering to show how much money you're actually earning versus how much you're actually spending. I know that comes down back to the basics, but at the same time, without this information, well, no bank is really going to know how well you're actually doing. They usually ask for like bank statements and things like that, but I always tell myself, at least this is just something I always say to myself, is I don't know how a bank can really get the best picture of your business just by looking at a statement. The only way they can really see it is if you're looking at a P&L, if you're looking at the balance sheet to see if they have any debt or anything like that. That's really what I think they're going to be looking at, and just to see what kind of interest rate they're going to be charging for you as a business owner, and just to see like how much money you're actually earning each month. Just to kind of get a general idea of how much they should be charging for the interest rate and what loan they think is going to be best for you. Unfortunately, though, I will say like the home process is not fun for this business owners. This couple, it took them about a month and a half to 2 months to secure the mortgage, I believe, and it was a very long and dragged out process. I don't remember what the interest rate was for the mortgage, but I don't believe it was low, unfortunately, which kind of sucks. But it's very hard for business owners, just because usually the money kind of varies month to month, so that's a whole nother kind of process with that as well. In terms of different tax strategies, though, there's plenty of tax strategies as soon as you do buy a home, so I can give you those if you're really looking for those. If you do end up getting a home, there's plenty of strategies you can do for that. So I'd be happy, if you do buy a home, or if you're in the process of looking for one, I could definitely give you those strategies as well, because that definitely help out in terms of savings on taxes as well. So
very cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was great to have you on the show and kind of pick your brain and get some of your Official financial expertise. So there you go, guys. I feel better now. I've reconciled for my financial episode. But thank you so much, Mike, for coming on. Just to quickly wrap up, I know we touched on this earlier in the episode, but where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said before too, like Facebook is probably the best way you can reach out to me. If you want to check out my website, braunfas.com. Same thing with email. You can reach me at mike@braunfas.com, and even phone call, text, whichever you prefer, 607-765-1466. And feel free to reach out to me. Bookkeeping, tax services, payroll, whatever it is you're looking for, I'm sure I can help out. And I'm always reasonable about price, and I always try to give more than I can take. So hopefully that helps, especially if you're looking for an accountant out there. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mike. I really appreciate it. Hope everybody enjoyed this week's episode, and I will catch you all in the next one. Bye.